All right. Well, hello again, Dr. Neves. Thank you for your time today to look at CapsimInbox. My name again is Matthew Schell. I'm Capsim's Market Development Manager, where I assist all of our academic and corporate contributing authors with creating their own custom micro-simulations from scratch via the use of our CapsimInbox platform. And I'd like to thank you for your time today as we kind of review the platform to see if it might be a good fit for the 2020 SIIA CODiE Awards for the Best Content Authoring, Development, or Curation Solution. So just to start off with a little bit of agenda, what I thought I would do first, Dr. Neves, is talk a little bit about CapsimInbox from an introductory level, kind of show you what the interface looks like, its main objectives that we're trying to achieve with it, just so we've got kind of a top-level view before going into the bulk of the presentation. After that, I'll tell you very briefly about us here at Capsim, a little bit about our history and where we originally got the idea for CapsimInbox from our corporate users. And then to kind of demonstrate the importance of why we wanted to make this an authoring platform, I figured I'd tell you a little bit about why we built the tool, how was it created, kind of what was our developmental philosophy behind it. But really, most of the presentation today will be actually going through the platform via a guided tour. And that's something I'll be able to provide to you in a hyperlink form for you to review after the fact if you'd like. And then immediately after that, we'll talk about what's the authoring process actually look like, and really what's the future of CapsimInbox hold, because it's kind of interesting that we're doing this demo now for the CODiEs, because we're moving from a more collaborative authoring kind of relationship, which will of course still author between authors and Capsim, but we're also working on being able to provide CapsimInbox as essentially a software as a service. That way instructional designers, both academic and corporate, can create their own solutions virtually free of any involvement here at Capsim. And then finally, I figured I'd just go ahead and relate some of the direct criteria to CapsimInbox to show how it may be a good contender for the category. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Awesome, excellent. So let's just start off by talking a little bit about Inbox with a brief introduction. So first and foremost, what exactly is CapsimInbox? Well, essentially CapsimInbox is one of the world's first simulation-based skill assessment tools where we're really seeking to assess the key career skills, whether they be more soft skill related, which we'll talk about quite a bit here, or hard skill related, as identified as some of the most important skills to have by either academia or from corporate employers themselves as to what they're looking for in new applicants, for instance. And what's important to note with CapsimInbox is it's kind of different from our previous history with simulations here at Capsim. I'll talk a little bit more about this in our About Us segment, but typically we do project group-based sims. With Inbox, we wanted to create a entirely self-directed, individualized, web-based kind of platform or assessment solution that would really put them in the role of a manager in the life to kind of see how would they respond to emails that may be your standard day-to-day operations, or even kind of the scenarios that the crises that can pop up at any given moment. So really trying to bridge the gap between theory and practice. Now, the way that we do this is with a 60-minute micro-simulation. But it all starts out with an onboarding where we ask the students, relative to your peers, where do you place yourself on the following skills by percentile? And for the purpose of today's demonstration, we'll be talking about our general management version of CapsimInbox. This is the first iteration we created that solely focuses on the top 5 soft skills that employers are looking for these days, being problem solving, initiating, organizing, leading, and communicative abilities. So after they do a quick self-assessment, we put them into the CapsimInbox micro-simulation, which looks just as you see it here now. And as you can see, just based on the user face up front, we tried to make it look like the Outlooks and Gmails that we use every day. That way it would increase the fidelity of the solution, make it more realistic, and more akin to the kind of day-to-day correspondence that virtually all careers are going to have, at least in some capacity with email. So try to keep it very much relatable. Now, over the course of about 60 minutes time, with an average completion around 30 to 45 minutes, students are going to respond to about 20 to 30 emails, and then at the end of which, they're going to be instantaneously provided with an individualized feedback report on their skills in relation to the general populace. And what we show here is their overall performance by percentile against all other CapsimInbox users of that particular version. And then we also visualize and identify self-awareness levels as well as skill gaps. So we're not only just giving the feedback, but we want to give the students the tools to identify places for improvement. That way we can help them create actionable goals going forward. Because a final component from an authoring perspective is that the author will provide developmental tactics to students. That way they can create these actionable goals that say, I want to increase this skill's proficiency by this date, and here's exactly how I'm going to assess myself, essentially. So just kind of a quick 30,000-foot view, if you will. Now, briefly, I thought I'd just give you a little bit of insight into us as a company here at Capsim, because we've been in the simulation industry for well over 35 years at this point. In fact, we started in the mid-1980s in terms of authoring by creating custom simulations for a lot of the major corporations out there, specifically to hit their professional development needs or identify high-potential employees, for example. But as I said, we are based here in the city of Chicago. We are a fairly small company, about 50 employees on average, I would say. And I myself have been here for about 3 years in time, where I've been overseeing our author efforts for the past year, year and a half at this point. But an excellent company to work for here in the city. Now, in terms of our academic reach, we're actually very well established in the higher education market with some of our more project-based, group-based sims that I alluded to earlier. In fact, our simulations capstone and foundation are pretty much, staple components of many of the major business curriculum, both undergrad and graduate level, particularly in strategic management classes. And at any given time, we're in about 1,100 universities around the globe, and we actually provide full support services with our staff here in Chicago to about 3,000 professors and about 140,000 students at any given point in time. And this includes high school, undergrad, graduate level, career and technical education, you name it. We've virtually seen applications of Inbox in particular in all of those key areas. In fact, I myself personally have utilized this quite extensively with a lot of the career and technical student organizations, specifically Future Business Leaders of America, Business Professionals of America, as well as DECA too. And then, of course, we still do have an effort, put forth an effort to assist our corporate clients with professional development training and fast-track development of employees, whether it be succession planning or just kind of identifying high potentials. And in fact, this is really where a lot of the thought process for creating CapsimInbox and as an authoring tool came from, because as we're doing these corporate trainings, we always keep our ear to the ground as to what are professors really looking for? What are corporations really looking for in terms of skills that their new employees they wish they had, as well as existing employees they wish they could develop? And really, when we looked into this and we looked at a lot of the research, we found that essentially this boiled down to soft skills, soft skills, soft skills. Being able to adequately work in a team, being able to collaborate, having leadership capabilities, problem solving, you name it. So we started to develop CapsimInbox, and we were looking at studies on both the academic and the corporate side of things. So we looked at, say, for instance, the Bloomberg Job Skills Report at the time, because we were developing this during the summer of the summer of 2017, with a release in August. And we were looking at, when they surveyed over 1,200 different recruiters through Bloomberg Business, over 550 different companies, they identified the most desired yet least common skill that they need to assess was leading, problem solving, and communicating. And on the academic side, we look at the GMAC, the Graduate Management Admission Council. Well, they had surveyed about 6,100 MBAs, alumni, just had gotten their degree, and they identified that over 85% of them said that even after getting their MBA that they needed more management education. And then if there was any one area in most need for improvement, it was being able to manage that human capital. So being able to work as a team, communicate effectively, being able to lead, essentially. So we're looking at these studies. We looked at a few other ones, like LinkedIn does a great workforce report annually that has some great facts, where in fact right now the main thing that companies are looking for is to help identify skill gaps. And that's where actually the authoring process comes into play with corporations, because we're working with a few right now to create custom simulations for them. But overall, what was the general thesis? What was the general feedback that we got on this? Well, a lot of the times if we don't assess these kind of skills in a practical way via Inbox or a similar tool, well, they can lead to some barriers when it comes to long-term success, like not being able to effectively work in a team or being too functionally or too technically oriented, for example. Any questions so far?
Not yet.
Okay, excellent. So just right before we go into the guided tour, what I thought I would do is kind of take you through, our kind of developmental philosophy for creating the Inbox platform, but also something that we discuss with every single one of our authors that we work with in terms of the capabilities, the functionality, really the end goal of creating a tool with Capsim. And what we did was we did a lot of research, and we worked with industrial and organizational psychologists as well as DePaul University professors here in Chicago. And we really boil it down to 4 key criteria that we need to have within an authoring platform, within an authoring tool, to promote meaningful development in students. And the first one is that we need to create a solution that was going to assess both knowing and doing. So actually assessing the practical application of knowledge in relation to the skills or competencies that we're assessing, whether they be soft skills, hard skills, or a combination of the two. Now, after that, we wanted to make sure that the assessment was going to foster accurate self-awareness, because self-reported data can be skeptical, can be questionable to say the least. We want to make sure we're providing some objective feedback, or at least comparing objective feedback with self-reporting data to provide to students. The third criteria we considered when creating Inbox is going to be, we want to deliver an engaging and relevant experience. So again, this is kind of relating to the simulated email aspect. High fidelity, it's experiential approach, it's definitely career related, and we're giving them that practical experience in a way that doesn't necessarily surpass that of what they would get in an internship or a co-op class, but certainly something that will give them an idea of what's it really like to work at a company going forward. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, is that, yes, we want to provide a good assessment, but we want to be able to provide that actionable feedback, specific developmental feedback directly from our contributing authors. That way they can give students the tips and tricks necessary, whether they be, just a list of different items, suggested readings, discussion topics, essay questions, etc. That way they can actually practically implement the changes they want to make to improve these skills, essentially. But now what we'll go ahead and do, Dr. Neves, is we'll go ahead and jump into a walkthrough the student experience. So I'm going to pop out of the presentation here for just a second, and then I'm going to come over to the live kind of demo link that we have. And again, this is something I'll be able to provide to you as well, okay?
All right, good, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to reiterate, completely web-based simulation. So we're just going to go ahead and walk through the student experience here real quick, and I'll go ahead and relate it to each of the different aspects that an author has the ability to change or edit to meet their specific needs with the platform. But the way that it works is that students log on at Capsim.com, they come here to their student dashboard, they're able to see when is their access open till for that particular version of Inbox. And then after the fact, they'll be able to see their feedback report as well as their individual development plan, if they want to create one or if they want to review one they've previously created. But for today, we'll just go ahead and jump in and take the assessment. So first things first, students go into a self-directed onboarding. First thing that they'll see is an introductory video, and more often than not, this is actually provided with the author, by the author themselves. We do kind of a Skype-based webinar-style video with every one of our authors. Kind of, lends itself to the fidelity of the simulated email experience. You're using like a Skype for Business equivalent. And what we do in this introductory video is the author demonstrates what is the exact need that this addresses. Why are these skills particularly important? What kind of experience do they have in the field? That, what kind of personal examples do they integrate within this? And then we move them into the actual self-assessment portion. So the videos are only about 1.5 to 2 minutes on average, very top level. Then they go into that self-assessment component I was referring to. So we're asking them, relative to your peers, where would you place yourself on the following skills? And these skills can be determined directly from the author, or we can suggest some to them based on previous inboxes that we've created. But typically, these are either going to fall into more of a soft skill category, like communicating or problem solving, or ethical decision making, or time management, for example, or they fall into more hard skills. To give you an example, like maybe it's being able to read a balance sheet, or being able to chart out a supply curve with some of our more quantitative versions of Inbox. Or we have a combination of the two, because, of course, they're both going to be relevant on the job.
Mm-hmm.
So what students do is they'll go ahead and self-assess. So they may say, I think I'm about average for leading. I'll put myself at 50. I've definitely got to work on my organizing capabilities, but initiating, I'm pretty good at that. And we'll end up actually comparing this self-assessment with the Inbox simulation performance later on. Now from there, we provide the student with their role. Who are you at this company, and what is the company that you work for? So this is where the scenario first starts to come into play for the author. Now, just right off the bat, we do have a variety of templates that we can provide, whether they want to, say, start with a consulting company. It's very common to start with a consulting company because, of course, you're working with different clients in different industries, leads to some very interesting situations. We also very commonly see manufacturing, service industries, a few different models. But in terms of what content are they writing, well, it's typically, what is the position of the student within this organization? How long have they been with the company? How many direct reports do they have, and who do they report to? So again, kind of top level. It's more about setting the scene than it is they need to know this entire backstory. And that goes just as the same for the company, because what we do is we create a company one-pager for the faux firm. And what we do is typically here we're including the mission and vision statement for the company, as well as any products or services that they offer, and any particular clients that you're going to be interacting with. But again, you don't need to know the company back and forth. It's really just more to set the scene, to set the story. The actual conversations and how you go about handling those will come a little bit later. And then after this kind of setting your role and everything, we have a brief technical rehearsal, kind of just walks the students, how do you exactly respond to emails, for instance, a tutorial. And then we get to the final page here, the take assessment page. So everything we went through so far, quick onboarding process, about 10 to 15 minutes on average, I would say, to complete. And then here on this final page, it's basically the conclusion of the onboarding, because after you click that green button there, it's going to start the timed experience. And the author even is able to change this text here to say, is there any last-minute information you want to provide before jumping in? And typically this is just, hey, you've just got back from a long extended holiday weekend. You're just kind of inundated with emails at this point, so you're kind of just ready to jump in and start answering some. Now, what's important to note is that the majority of our versions are a single 60-minute experience. We do have some exceptions to that, which I can talk about. But for the purpose of this demonstration, what we do is we provide individuals with 60 minutes to respond to about 20 to 30 emails on average, I would say. And now, referring to the platform itself, again, trying to make it look like a lot of the email platforms that we use on a day-to-day basis, the first thing you'll see is up here at the top, they're able to see the time they have remaining. And they can actually hide this time if they'd like to. Some students enjoy that feature. But on the left here on this navigational tab, they're able to see their inbox itself, which of course includes the emails they have to respond to, indicating positions of the individual and whatnot and subject lines. Any emails they respond to, they can review in their sent items folder. And they can even archive certain emails if maybe they want to revisit them later and prioritize other ones, because we do in fact have both time and priority bonuses. And a good example of this would be you may want to respond to, say, the CEO of the company before you respond to one of your sales reps in the field, for instance. Now, additionally, what we have is a company drive here on the left, where the author is able to input virtually any type of media that they need to kind of build up the fidelity of their version. So this is, of course, going to include the company one-pager we described, so students can reference it again, but also an organizational chart. And this is where we really start to work with the author, too, because, they may say, I need an article that, covers this topic here and some text that's about, 500 words long. We actually have an in-house media team that can assist directly with that. And to give you an example related to an organizational chart, of course, we want to provide this to show the student where are they in relation to the other players, the other parties they're in contact with. But we've even gotten these as handwritten, and we can go ahead and use our media team to create any of these resources directly for them fairly quickly, actually. Now, as you can imagine as well, all of these characters we have templates for, but a lot of the times the individuals, authors, will go ahead and create those themselves. Really, the main piece of content that they're going to be writing for CapsimInbox is, of course, the emails themselves. So looking over here to the right, you'll see we've got a sample email here, and they have full text, text editing capabilities to create these. And then below that, in terms of assessment, how do we actually get the student responses? You'll see that we have multiple choice. Now, the reason that we did this is that we wanted the authors to be able to create email responses that had varying levels of effectiveness. So say, for instance, we're talking about an email where we're measuring problem solving. Well, maybe response 1 is the most effective by far. We're going to allot 10 points for the student to select that response because it is the most effective. Maybe response B is less effective, maybe 5 points. Maybe response 3 is kind of more neutral, it doesn't really move the ball. We'll put that at 0. Or maybe 4 is completely going down the wrong track, a very clear incorrect decision or ineffective decision. We can actually deduct points from that as well. But we also leave it open to the author. If there's a particular type of assessment model they'd like to use, we're more than happy to work with them directly to make it work within the solution. We just simply provide again, some scoring templates to make it a little bit easier on the process. Now, in addition to the emails, we also have instant messages that can pop up as well, just as a way to kind of break up the stimuli that way they're not just responding to emails. And typically these are shorter and a little bit more time sensitive. So here we're looking at an example of a sales rep trying to do a bulk discount based on volume. And you could just say, yeah, sure, go with it. You've got the right percentage discount. But if you were to check in the Drive file and look at some of the other documents the author created, you'd find that they're actually entitled to a higher discount. So just kind of a way to show you how these things would work and how the critical thinking is kind of built in. So after they complete all of the emails, they're going to be prompted with an email that says you've completed the inbox experience. And then what's great is that instantaneously, immediately, they're going to be provided with an individual feedback report that hits on a lot of those keynotes we talked about at the beginning of the call. So what this is going to include is their overall percentile against all other CapsimInbox users of that version. The developmental index here, well, this is going to relate more to the proficiency in which they responded to emails, as well as the consistency of that proficiency. Just kind of to give them a gauge of how frequent you were able to click the most effective response. And then below that is where things really start to get interesting, because this is, again, where we compare the self-assessment with the inbox assessment. So we're actually visualizing the skill gaps. And then in terms of self-awareness, we want to help the individual identify, are you overrating yourself or underrating yourself, because both can be detrimental depending on the scenario. We want to give them a good check to see just how well they know their own skills. And then in regards to skill gaps, it's really all about helping them identify which key skills are in most need for improvement. So not too much emphasis on the author aspect from here. This, of course, does interact with the scoring that the author creates in their version of Inbox. But in terms of how these reports are generated, that's all with our own algorithm, of course. But with this feedback, how do we exactly utilize it? How does the author then translate their performance into next steps for improvement? Well, what we have is after they get their feedback report, they are immediately ported into an optional individual development plan builder. So we'll have another video here from the author talking about the importance of creating, actionable goals to improve the skill. But below that, we actually show them their scores for each skill. And within these expandable tabs, we have developmental tactics provided directly to us from the author. And again, these can be anything from suggested readings to, tips and tricks on how to improve it, in both an academic and a corporate sphere. But really, this is the main tool post-assessment that the students are provided to create those actionable goals. We do provide the level of developmental need, and then they're able to make those action items by clicking Improve on any of the skills here. And the way that it works is that they select which skill they want to improve. We have them reflect on 2 or 3 ways this is relevant to their career, or 2 or 3 ways they'll utilize the skill. They actually create a goal statement. So I want to increase my, say, recognizing issues skill by 5% by no later than this date. And I'd like to be evaluated by going through this version of CapsimInbox again. And then they actually create their plan, the action items themselves as to what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, and what resources are necessary in order to improve upon that. And 9 times out of 10, this is heavily based upon the developmental tactics that the author provides. Now, additionally, what we do provide is professor debrief guides. Essentially, the author creates debrief guides. That way, say you get through, you have a cohort of 30 students that just go through an inbox version, and you immediately want to go into group discussion. Well, the author will create those discussion questions, an instructor guide with additional instructor notes, any insight into what was their thought process for creating the scenarios the students encountered, and so even some essay questions as well. Because very commonly our main question was, how do I exactly improve the skill with my students? How do I debrief them, essentially? And then just to give you a quick view of what things look like from the instructor side, This is virtually, there's virtually no administrative burden with this simulation. I mean, honestly, it's as simple as the professor can provide the students with a hyperlink in their syllabus or via email where they immediately go, register into the simulation, complete it, and then the professor can kind of just sit back and watch the results come in as you see here. And the kind of information they see is their class average. How does the class score against the general population? What's the average for each of the skills being assessed? And then a breakdown of each individual student's scores, when they completed it, how long did it take them, and if and when did they complete an IDP. And this is particularly relevant because in terms of like empirical assessment, of course, we do provide our own based on the percentiles. But, a lot of times the instructors will say, I really want to grade them based on the effort they put into their IDP, to give you an example of how they would be assessed. And then any additional resources that an author provides, an Inbox author provides, will be directly here within the resource section for the instructor. And this includes everything from an administrative guide, how to implement it into your course, as well as the specific versions professor debrief guide to debrief the students on how they performed, essentially. And then that brings us back to the student dashboard. So basically, what I could wrap up by showing you here is that say they go through different versions, say they go through the same version twice, we're actually able to show them the net change in skills, because very commonly Inbox is used in a pre-test, post-test kind of scenario. And in fact, many of our authors create versions with this particularly in mind for research purposes, or to say for assurance of learning, or benchmarking their students to see how well are students, hitting the learning objectives of the course, for example. So very commonly used for accreditation there too. So, any questions about the actual student experience itself within the simulation, or anything you'd like me to expand upon?
Okay. Everything that I had came up with you were presenting, you answered, so.
Oh,
that was
fantastic.
Good.
Perfect. Yeah. So what I'll do from here is we can just kind of focus the remainder of our time on, what does the actual author process look like, and, what versions we've been able to create since then, and then relating them to the direct criteria, because I'll be able to show you exactly how we've changed our process from a more hands-on approach in 2019 to where we're moving forward with that SIIA kind of solution moving forward. So, because of this platform, what we're able to do since August 2017, when our initial version, General Management, was released, is that, through the remainder of 17 and through 2018, we created a lot of in-house versions with this. So we created a people management version that focused more on supervisory roles. My personal favorite is actually ethical decision-making. We created that in-house. That one's particularly fun because you're a boutique hotel manager and you're dealing with all sorts of gray area issues where there's really no right way out. So you got to kind of make some judgment calls there. And in fact, our most recent in-house version was time management, which was just recently featured in an article of Harvard Business Review as a good way to kind of assess your time management skills via microsimulation. And I've included that link down here at the bottom because I'll, of course, provide you with this PDF presentation. But over the course of late 2018 and then moving into 2019, I personally worked with over a dozen different authors, particularly in academia. Everybody from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln to Wake Forest University, University of Tampa, DePaul University, essentially across the board, Baldwin-Wallace University, name a few. And really, we wanted to see if these authors would be willing to create solutions that could span Inbox across the business curriculum. And as we started on these initial versions, a lot of instructors, a lot of authors, very soon in the process are like, oh, I see the potential for this. I can create so many different things. And in fact, going into 2020 here, and when I show you the versions we have currently in the works, many of those are by our existing authors from 2019. So, and of course, at the end of the call, I can provide you, of course, with access to general management, the one we primarily went through, to see the entire student experience from their eyes, as if you were a student in the course. But I can also provide you with access to any of our other versions as well. Now, how do we typically see this used in the classroom? Well, as you can imagine, we see it very often used as just a fun exercise, just as something different and more experiential for students to do, whether it's a homework assignment or more of a flipped classroom setting, very commonly done. I would say more often would be the second and third uses. We very often see this used as essentially a live case study. So, and this goes with our authors as well, creating it to hit their direct needs, but also, of course, broad use for other users to try. But the case study is more about, kind of putting them in those job relevant scenarios to increase participant engagement and whatnot. And then probably the most common at the moment is as an assessment tool, being able to actually capture those proficiency levels on the career skills, and then being able to compare them over time via that pre and post test model, essentially. But now what I can do is I can kind of walk you through what does the process for authoring look like in terms of timeline and key steps in the process, and I can even talk about what content are they exactly creating. We covered most of it in the walkthrough, but just to highlight those, and then I can go through kind of a feature list of what kind of newer additions we've made to the platform to make it even more experiential. So in terms of what does the authoring process look like, well, all in all, the fastest we've created a version of CapsimInbox is just over a month, actually, start to finish. But I would say most commonly, to give you an average with the authors that I personally worked with in 2019, I would say that on average this has taken about 3 to 4 months tops on average to complete a version. And what does that really entail? That entails everything from the time we get their initial concept form where we decide to move forward with that version, all the way through formal release. And the way that it works is we start off with, if someone's interested in authoring, we provide them with a simple 2-page fillable initial concept form. They've typically gone through one of our existing versions at that point, so they have an idea of what it can do. And this is just a way for them to jot down their thoughts of the concept, of course. Now, we do a quick review call to make sure that, we go ahead and validate to make sure it's hitting the key learning objectives and everything, is going to meet both the author's needs as well as broad use for other academics that might want to utilize it. And then we go ahead and move forward with the content creation process, which, as you can imagine, takes up the majority of the process. We're talking about a month to a month and a half on average here. And typically that's going to consist of just creating the emails, the instant messages, the developmental tactics, and the debrief guide. So pretty straightforward there. And of course, our templates kind of expedite that process as well. Now, after we've got all the content created within a given inbox, we've got it all uploaded in the platform, we can test it and it's ready to go. We can rely on either the author's colleagues or network, but typically we always go through our own subject matter expert review. So we have a network of about 120 different subject matter experts across the country that we try at least at a minimum of 3 go through the version of Inbox and provide their detailed feedback on how it can be improved. And really this revolves around the relevancy and validity of the assessment more than anything. And we have documents for that as well to provide to the subject matter experts. That way we make sure we're getting all the feedback necessary to improve the version. Now, alongside that, we're also doing student pilots. Now, this is sometimes convenient where we can utilize the courses that the author is teaching at that time. However, again, we try to get a good mixed sample of at least 3 different institutions with 3 different classes in 3 different formats. And what we're doing here is that, number one, we want to be able to gauge student feedback on the experience. Does it make sense? Is it fun? And then also to obviously populate our sample group for validity purposes. And typically, we like to see a threshold of at least 200 students go through a version of Inbox before we even start talking about validity purposes. And then finally, we do an internal review with our product development team as well as our quality assurance team to make sure everything is on par with our existing versions. And then we move on towards formal release. And depending on if it's an academic or a corporate author, we can also engage in collaborative promotional efforts to really, show, the world what is this solution, how is it different from anything that came before it, and what's the need it's addressing. And again, at every step through the process, we're right there alongside the authors to offer assistance anyway, and that comes down to me personally. I mean, a lot of the time through our content creation process, we're doing, bi-weekly review calls every other week where we're kind of going through it, checking the flow, making sure everything makes narrative sense, and we're always providing access to the professor so at any time they can see the state of their microsimulation they're creating. Very briefly, I won't hit on this too much because we have covered it quite a bit, but what are they actually creating? We're looking at the scenario, what kind of skills that they would like to assess or competencies. They got the email and IM content. They got the developmental tactics, that way students can make their IDPs. And then we've got the professor debrief guide. So these are the key areas here. And again, even for these, we have those templates available. And then just on a final note, in terms of the features of the simulation, what can it do that we may not have touched on during the walkthrough? Well, first and foremost, the biggest feature is, of course, email threading. So think of this kind of like a digital choose-your-own-adventure, where we can have divergent paths that reconverge or go off in completely different tangents. We've done that quite a bit, particularly with our business law version. We also have the ability to smart thread, and what I mean by this is that, say the student selects an incorrect response, we would loop them back, tell them that they had an incorrect response, then bring them back to that email and remove the incorrect response. This is something we use in our digitalized escape room version. Now, additional features would be like the timer. We can set it to any time the author likes, but typically they're 60 minutes. In terms of direct file attachments to emails and Drive files, again, we can put virtually any type of media in here. We do have that capability for the instant messages themselves. We can create different question groups. Think of them as almost like parallel items or randomizing items. That way, two students are going through, marginally different experiences. That's yet still the scoring is standard. We have a section functionality where maybe if an author doesn't want to create a single 60-minute micro sim, maybe they want to create 4 mini simulations that are only 10 to 15 minutes apiece. Maybe it's to co-align with key points in their curriculum. Maybe it's to co-align with the modules of a textbook. We can do that as well. I already hit on time and priority bonuses for emails, but the final thing we have is different response options. So during the walkthrough, we only focused on standard pick one multiple choice response, but we do also have the functionality for them to select multiple answers. Maybe 3 out of the 5 are correct, or what's most intriguing is the ability to write in written responses. So in a good way, an example of this would be, say we went through a series of emails where you made your multiple choice responses and you got your resolution. You'll get one final email from, say, your supervisor, for example. Hey, I understand that you did X, Y, Z related to this situation. I'd like to know your thought process behind it. I'd like to know your justification for why you went that way. And what we do is we provide the students with full text editing capabilities. That way they can submit a response and write it just as they would in the real world on writing it to their supervisor. And what we have is we still have the empirical assessment, the objective data given by the scoring allotments of the author, and then we provide the user, or the instructor, if you will, with the ability to add a custom score based on those responses if they would choose to utilize them. So they got a couple different purposes they can do with that. And then just in closing, before we get to the criteria, I figured I'd show you where we're moving towards in the future with CapsimInbox. What we primarily went through just there was that kind of more hands-on approach with us here at Capsim. But as I said, we are actually right now in the process of moving Inbox towards a SIIA-style platform. And what we're trying to do is, I've actually got some screens here I could show you what this looks like, because we are just now moving into the developmental phase of this. Is we wanted to make it essentially not too different from the PowerPoint presentation deck that we're going through right now. We wanted to be able to make it so you could flip back and forth between editing and presenter view, and be able to make it, essentially through drop-down lists and kind of, live case chains, be able to create your entire inbox from scratch with a series of informative videos, as well as our same in-office Capsim support that helps out all our regular users. They're going to be trained in order to provide assistance on these as well. And really, who's this made for more than anybody? Well, really, we wanted to be able to provide this directly to instructional designers. That way they could create their own solutions, test their own solutions, and implement their own solutions with little to no involvement with Capsim. However, of course, if they do wish to have our involvement, we're happy to assist. But to kind of give you what kind of functionality will you have here, you're going to be able to see on the left here to be able to create stimuli. So actually create an email, a message, or a group text. We'll have an outline view. Think of it as like a mind mapping, actually visually representing the relation of these emails in a virtual space. We'll have an address book, so they can create their characters or choose from our templates. And then it's as simple as a drop-down button, where as they're creating something, they can say, okay, well, here's my subject line. I want this email to come from Taylor Burtnick, the Assistant Director of Human Resources. They can then create the email itself with the text editing I was referring to, as well as the responses to that. And then for each individual response, they'll have a control panel here where they can put triggers on the response. Maybe it only comes up if a previous email is responded to, or maybe there's a 20-second or 5-minute delay on it, for instance. And then for each of the skills, the different responses, they can also assign the scoring. What skill is being measured? And we can do multiple skills at once. And then what is the positive or negative value attributed to that based on the student's response? And then one of the big pieces of feedback we had from our 2019 authors was, I would love to be able to give my students immediate feedback as soon as they select an incorrect response. And now we can actually do that by adding this Include Participant Feedback button here. So they'll actually get a pop-up that'll show them exactly why another response may have been more adequate. And then just moving back over here to the tab here on the left again, you'll have your Drive file where you can input all of your tabs and change the hierarchy and everything and subfolders. And then, of course, you'll have the Preview Experience button where you'll be able to click into that and then see exactly the way your emails are set up in the authoring sign, but from the perspective of the student, essentially. Any questions here about the general process we followed in 2019 or anything about the software as a service platform we're creating?
Not at the moment.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, absolutely. Well, as a result of the kind of the 2019 efforts we did, as well as what we're looking at here, we're going to be utilizing both of those methods, both of those kind of pathways of creating a version moving forward into 2020, because we want to make sure we have a solution for every author out there. And in fact, as I mentioned earlier, we're working on nearly a dozen more new versions at any given point in time. We're working with some of our academic partners to fill out the rest of the business curriculum, like with strategic management and finance management. I had mentioned recurring authors, so our microeconomics authors are now moving on to doing macro and international economics. Our cultural awareness author has got a wide breadth of experience in several areas. She's going to be moving on to making both a data analytics and a social media marketing version, but also in the corporate sphere, too. But to provide you with a good, strong example of academia, we're actually working with one of the major universities here in the city of Chicago right now to create a custom version around public health with the authoring platform I was showing you. And so that's a good example there. And then on the corporate side, we're actually working with one of the largest insurance companies to essentially make an inbox where it's like, how do you run your own independent office? Everything from how do you calculate ROI to sending out marketing efforts, that sort of thing. And in fact, just on Thursday of this week, we're having a conversation with one of the largest healthcare accreditation bodies in the country around creating a version specifically around assessing employees' understanding of ISO 9001 standards. So just to kind of give you an idea of the kind of flexibility of the platform more than anything. And then bringing it back to academia, a lot of times we'll have these versions demoed in courses or provide access to instructors like yourself, and we say that, hey, if this isn't the best solution for you, if you think it'd be done better, happy to work with you to create something that's custom for your institution, essentially. And then just in closing, Dr. Neves, I can kind of relate everything back to the criteria for the category, but I just want to stop here real quick to see if you had any questions about any of the rest of the presentation so far.
I think it's still good.
Okay, excellent. So just kind of relating it to the main criteria then, in terms of searchability, how easy is it to search different topics and everything within CapsimInbox? So this is actually something we highlight on our website. You probably saw this already, but we actually do have it separated by the different topical areas. We do indicate the education level, both on our website and when we're doing demonstrations of this with potential users. And then we also quantify it by skill type, the soft skills versus more quantitative skills, or if there's a combination of the two. Now, in regards to innovation, what makes CapsimInbox particularly innovative? Really, it kind of goes back to the beginning of the presentation where we were talking about wanting to bridge the gap, kind of bringing theory into practice with these live case studies, essentially, and really put the student in an atmosphere where they've got real-world context for learning in a way that, outside of internships and, again, co-ops, that there's really no way of adequately assessing how they would perform in that scenario. Of course, it still can never replace the real thing, but a good, middleman in between. And then I would say, again, in terms of the innovation, there's a lot of assessments out there that focus on soft skills, and typically these are very much more involved. The main one that comes to mind is the ILLiad assessment, which is essentially like a 4-hour sort of in-person assessment that's looking at your actual communication style, and some quantitative assessment as well. Well, with Inbox, we're giving them that instant objective feedback immediately after they complete the sim. So they're actually getting that feedback on their practical application of those concepts. In regards to the reporting and analytics side of things, well, we're able to provide various levels of data to the instructor or to the author for research purposes. And again, personally identifiable information is obviously protected. We give ambiguous information for more benchmarking purposes, but we can look at this from the professor perspective, from the individual level, if they want to see how students in their class are performing. We can look at it from the cohort level for more, maybe assurance of learning standards. But again, even from the institution level to benchmark institutions between different organizations, essentially. And because of this data, it helps a lot with actually improving curriculum, improving, programs, not just business, but eventually outside of the business curriculum. So identifying where are the strengths of the program, as well as helping to identify what areas of the program are in need of improvement. Maybe we're not focusing enough content on that particular area within the curriculum. And then bringing them back down to the user level again, just the ease of use of being able to view and track the results. Basically you provide that hyperlink and then you just watch the results come in essentially. In terms of integration, we integrate very well with some of the third-party applications out there, but really the main thing I want to focus on here is how we integrate, different types of media into the simulation to make it just like it would be in Outlook or Gmail. So we can have hyperlinks directly within the simulation, whether these be to articles or to research or to data sets. Again, we could put any type of media in the Drive file or as a file attachment, being the documents, photos, videos, and so on. And to give you a good example of how we've integrated with a third-party service, so what we did was we worked with a DePaul University professor here in Chicago to create a data analytics forensic accounting quick assessment. It's actually powered by the CapsimInbox platform. And what we do in that is the student is essentially looking to investigate fraud at their company. So they're working within Inbox to get certain documents from the stakeholders in the company. They then take those documents into Tableau, this kind of third-party data analysis program. They do their analysis, and then they come back to Inbox to create their assessment. To report their assessment of who committed fraud. And, we're actually moving towards the functionality where we can have that, within CapsimInbox's own, platform for data analysis, because we are moving forward with our own Inbox version of that. But just to kind of give you an idea of how we've integrated in the past. In terms of customization, I think we've kind of hit on this quite a bit throughout it, but really the sky's the limit here. It doesn't have to be related to a business curriculum. We've seen interest in this for things like event management. How does an event manager, say in Las Vegas, manage on a single day a major corporate outing, a marriage, for example, along with, say, a convention at the same time? We're seeing this used as a textbook companion where, after each module of the textbook, you're going to be able to have a practical assessment of the content you literally just read. We're seeing this used in human resources areas for a screening tool or as a component of a training program, as I've referenced some of our more corporate examples. But again, in terms of customization, everything from the scenario to the role, the skills, format, delivery, and the scoring itself, all of that is fully customizable by the author, as well as the reporting and feedback. We can go as lightweight or as in-depth into this as the author would like to provide any materials that they think would benefit the end user or the professor. And to give you an example, this could be as short as a 2 to 3 page developmental tactics with tips and tricks to, say, our cultural awareness version that has a 60-page, essentially like an e-textbook module that kind of reports on, how to improve these skills going forward with a lot of subsequent research put into it. So there's quite a range there on what we could do in terms of reporting and feedback. In terms of cost, benefit, and scalability, really the main cost benefit here is, I don't have it listed as a bullet point, but there is no upfront cost for someone to develop a version of Inbox with us with our current model. We simply have a revenue share model that works for a lot of our authors where they simply get a percentage of each unit sold after they've created it. But when we move to the software as a service model, what we're probably going to end up doing is some sort of monthly subscription fee and then a very small user fee on that. But in terms of its benefits and scalability, we're talking about a very flexible modular platform here, and we've talked about a couple of the different examples of how Inbox can be utilized. Really, it's that real world relevance and validity, which I'll speak a little bit more to in just a second, that they're getting out of the Inbox assessment, kind of again that theory and practice argument. And then in terms of scalability, it's virtually limitless. We have the capability to have 10 students go through an Inbox at the same time or 10,000. We have all of those server capabilities, the technical capabilities on our end are already in line to support these amount of students going through it. And in fact, we have tens of thousands of students going through Inbox in any given year with no issues whatsoever. In terms of standard alignment, how do we actually line these up? Well, I took you a little bit through the research-based approach we did with kind of hearing anecdotal evidence from our corporate users as well as a lot of the research out there at the time, and then those 4 pillars that I was discussing into what we need out of a successful tool. But how have authors actually aligned this with standards? Well, I can give you 2 good examples. The first one being that ISO 9001 example that we're currently speaking with the healthcare accreditation body with. And then also our HR, CapsimInbox Human Resources author, he was a former director at Boeing. Rather than keep it close to learning objectives of a course, he wanted to relate them to SHRM standards. So basically we went that way. And again, these standards are fully customizable. We can have skill categories with subcategories of competencies underneath. There's a lot of play we have there. And in fact, about testing the validity of the assessment and how well it meets the standards of say, an organization, for instance. Well, we actually did a little bit of research on this with our general management, people management, and ethical decision-making versions. It's a document called the Technical Synopsis. I'm sure you've seen it as a part of the resources. What I'm specifically referencing is the content and criterion-related validity that we were able to achieve based on actually comparing MBA CapsimInbox performance with the performance reviews of their supervisors, essentially. So we do have some data there as well. And then segmentation, what are how can different enterprises use this? Again, academia, we're looking at live case studies, assessment tool, or just a regular exercise. Corporations are using this for training purposes, or more often than not for, succession planning or identification of high potential employees. And we're always constantly adding new features to this. So, as time goes on and on, we're going to eventually have all of the features of a given inbox platform with additional third-party integration and features. That way, virtually any enterprise can have all the tools they need to create any custom simulation they'd like from scratch. And then just to wrap things up with the final 4 criteria, I'll just go ahead and list them here now. Accessibility, if we're talking about, say, for the author themselves, throughout the entire process from that first concept call all the way until the completion of it, we provide them a demo link. So at any time, they can go to this hyperlink and see the immediate, to-the-date, real-time status of their version. If we have multiple authors, we can give admin and associate access, because sometimes we have ghostwriters that like to contribute as well. But even from a user standpoint, maybe the admin wants to see all the information come in, and then the associates or the professors implementing it. We can have that kind of distinction too. And then a big one is LMS integration. So we are actually integrated with several of the major LMSs at this time for single sign-on and reporting the results of the assessment. So this includes Moodle, Blackboard, Canvas, Schoology, to name a few. In terms of the navigation and how you go through it, most commonly this is done at the desktop. I would say 9 times out of 10. However, we do have full functionality on tablets. However, we are still working on mobile access for this. As you can imagine, all of those different criteria and everything the student has to choose from can be kind of hard to fit on a small screen. But we're actively working on that. And then in terms of shareability, to make it easier, if says, hey, someone's interested in Inbox, we can always provide a template or access to an existing version to give them an idea of what it looks like. If they want to share their work with others, it is, again, as easy as sending a hyperlink. And really, for people to be able to try it and get a feel for it, it's fairly straightforward because there's really no administrative burden. They don't really have to do a lot of onboarding or learn how to implement it. It's as simple as provide the student access and you're good to go. And then finally, in terms of ease of use, we're talking about it can be created in as little as a month. However, on average, we're looking at about 3 months. We have all sorts of documentations for content to make it easier for the author to create said content. We've got constant Capsim support with myself personally and our in-house staff. And of course, we have the upcoming authoring platform that I gave you a brief look at. Will really provide all the tools directly to the author from that point forward. So, kind of encapsulate everything there. And that's pretty much everything. We're right about on time here and everything. So I just figured I would, end by saying, thank you for your time, of course, Dr. Neves, and I'd be happy to address any particular questions you have at this point.
At the moment, I don't have any, but if I happen to have any, is it okay if I just reach out to you?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I'll go ahead and follow up with an email right after this where I can include demo access, which we could talk about in just a second. But yeah, any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But just kind of in general, is there any feedback you have on the assessment or any particular thoughts?
I mean, off the top of my head, I mean, I think there was a lot to the platform. I thought it was really interesting how it tracks everybody and everything as they kind of went through it, like the updates that are coming with like the immediate feedback and things like that. I just thought that was really interesting. But yeah, the real work detection is really nice too.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate the feedback. Just in closing, I know you've of course got all the resources within the CODiE Judge portal, but I figured, if there's any particular version, I would suggest if you wanted access to, happy to provide it. If you wanted to try, say, like general management, people management, or ethical decision making, or time management, any of those four, I think that those would probably be the best in terms of showing the breadth of features that we have. Would you like to try any access to those, or do you feel as though you have enough resources at this time?
Yeah, you can send it along. I'll take a look.
Yeah. Is there anyone? Yeah, no, perfect. Then what I'll do is I'll give you access to general management, and I'll give you access to time management as well, just because it's more, it was just frequently, highlighted in the HBR article. Okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Excellent. And then I'll, of course, include in that email with the demo access the recording of this as well, and I'll go ahead and CC Dr. Viner in there as well. That way she has access to everything, including the presentation too. Okay?
Perfect. Sounds great.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time, Dr. Neves. I do appreciate it, and you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you so much.
No problem. Have a good one.